He was once the golden boy of Hollywood, a child star turned blockbuster sensation. The face of Disney's Even Stevens and later the action hero of the Transformers franchise. By his early 20s, Shia LaBeouf was one of the most bankable young actors in the world. Hailed as the future of cinema, but behind the fame and millions, his life was spiraling into chaos. Addiction, violent outbursts, and disturbing allegations would soon eclipse his talent. From being arrested multiple times for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct, to lawsuits accusing him of emotional and physical abuse, LaBeouf's career became a cautionary tale of wasted potential. His reputation as Hollywood's rising star crumbled, leaving fans to wonder, how did the kid who once embodied youthful charm transform into a man known for scandal and self-destruction? This is the story of Shia LaBeouf's meteoric rise, his darkest battles with addiction and violence, and the scandals that nearly destroyed him. Shia Sadie LaBeouf was born on June 11, 1986, in Los Angeles, California. His childhood was far from the glossy world of Hollywood he would one day inhabit. Shia's parents, Jeffrey LaBeouf and Shayna Sadie, lived on the fringes of stability. His father, a Vietnam War veteran, struggled with drug addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. His mother, a visual artist and dancer, fought to keep the family afloat while navigating financial hardship. The environment Shia grew up in was marked by instability, poverty, and chaos. He has spoken candidly about how his father's addiction and erratic behavior left deep scars on his psyche. There were periods when his father would vanish from his life, leaving him to cope with abandonment and uncertainty. His parents eventually divorced, and Shia lived primarily with his mother, though the trauma of his father's absence and dysfunction lingered heavily. Despite the turmoil, young Shia developed a sharp wit and an instinct for performance. He often used humor as a coping mechanism, entertaining neighbors and classmates with impressions and stand-up routines. By the age of 10, he began performing comedy in local clubs, channeling his difficult upbringing into raw energy on stage. Shia has described his childhood as one where survival required toughness and creativity. He learned early how to navigate unpredictable adults and chaotic environments, skills that would later serve him as both an actor and a public figure. But these same experiences also sowed the seeds of the volatility and rage that would haunt him in adulthood. His relationship with his father remained complicated, a mix of love, fear, and resentment that would later inspire some of his most personal and acclaimed work, including the semi-autobiographical film Honey Boy. Shia LaBeouf's education was unconventional, reflecting the instability of his upbringing. He attended public schools in Los Angeles but was never particularly drawn to academics. Instead, he found his true calling in performance, using humor and storytelling as tools to escape the difficulties of his home life. At just 10 years old, he began performing stand-up comedy in coffee shops and small clubs, often delivering routines filled with sharp observations and crude humor well beyond his years. These early experiences gave him confidence on stage and a fearlessness that would later define his acting style. LaBeouf's path to acting began almost by necessity. Struggling financially, he saw Hollywood as a way to support his mother. He began auditioning for roles while still a child, driven by both ambition and survival. In 2000, he landed his breakout role as Louis Stevens on the Disney Channel series Even Stevens. The show quickly became a hit, with Shia's quirky, energetic performance earning him widespread recognition. In 2003, he won a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Performer in a Children's Series, cementing his status as one of Disney's brightest young stars. But LaBeouf didn't stop at television. Even as a teenager, he was determined to break into film. He appeared in smaller roles in movies like Holes, 2003, which showcased his ability to balance humor with emotional depth. His charisma and raw energy made him stand out, attracting the attention of major studios. By the time he finished his high school years, LaBeouf was already transitioning from child star to Hollywood's next big thing. These early years set the stage for his meteoric rise. What began as a child's way of coping with poverty and chaos had transformed into a genuine career. One that promised fame, fortune, and an escape from the instability of his past. Yet even as success knocked at his door, the unresolved wounds of his childhood lingered beneath the surface, ready to resurface when the pressures of stardom became overwhelming. By the mid-2000s, Shia LaBeouf had firmly outgrown his Disney beginnings. His big-screen breakthrough came in 2007, a year that would change his life forever. First, he starred in Disturbia, a Hitchcock-inspired thriller that became a surprise box office hit and showcased his ability to carry a film as a leading man. That same year, he was cast in Transformers, Michael Bay's explosive sci-fi blockbuster that grossed over $700 million worldwide. Overnight, LaBeouf went from a former child actor to one of the hottest young stars in Hollywood. Transformers became a cultural phenomenon, and LaBeouf's performance as Sam Witwicky made him a household name. He reprised the role in 2 sequels, solidifying his status as the face of the franchise. For a time, he seemed unstoppable, charismatic, relatable, and bankable. Studios saw him as a new kind of leading man, vulnerable yet energetic, capable of balancing humor with action. Hollywood rewarded him with even bigger opportunities. In 2008, Steven Spielberg handpicked him for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where he played Mutt Williams, the son of Harrison Ford's iconic archaeologist. Though the film received mixed reviews, it cemented LaBeouf's place alongside Hollywood legends. Around this period, he also took on roles in films like Eagle Eye and Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps, further demonstrating his versatility. At the height of his fame, LaBeouf was earning millions, appearing on magazine covers, and being touted as the next great actor of his generation. Yet, even as he climbed higher, cracks began to appear. He often described himself as uncomfortable with fame, struggling with the constant scrutiny and pressure of carrying blockbuster films. Unlike other stars who embraced Hollywood's glamorous lifestyle, LaBeouf seemed restless, often rebelling against the very system that had made him famous. Still, his success in this era was undeniable. He had gone from stand-up comedy in dingy clubs to working with some of the most powerful directors in the industry. Shia LaBeouf's career peak was meteoric, but as history would prove, the higher he soared, the harder he would fall. Fame gave him money and recognition, but it also magnified the unresolved chaos from his childhood, setting the stage for the scandals that would soon consume him. Shia LaBeouf's love life has been as turbulent and headline-grabbing as his career. From high-profile romances to bitter breakups, his relationships often mirrored the chaos in his personal life, becoming yet another source of public fascination and controversy. In the late 2000s, at the height of his Transformers fame, LaBeouf was romantically linked to several co-stars and fellow young Hollywood stars, including Carey Mulligan and Megan Fox. His relationship with Mulligan, in particular, drew attention because of its intensity and sudden end. Shia later admitted that his own restlessness and issues with commitment played a role in the breakup, a pattern that would repeat throughout his love life. In 2012, LaBeouf began a relationship with actress and model Mia Goth. Their romance was marked by passion but also volatility. The couple made headlines in 2015 when they were seen having a heated argument in Germany, with witnesses fearing the fight might turn violent. Despite the turbulence, they married in 2016 in a Las Vegas ceremony. Though even that was filled with confusion, reports initially suggested the marriage wasn't legally binding. Their union ended in divorce in 2018, though they later reconciled briefly before splitting again. Perhaps the most explosive chapter in LaBeouf's romantic history came with his relationship with musician FKA Twigs. In 2020, she filed a lawsuit against him, accusing him of sexual battery, assault, and emotional abuse. Her detailed allegations, including claims of manipulation and violent behavior, shocked fans and painted a chilling portrait of LaBeouf's private life. The lawsuit not only tarnished his reputation but also brought renewed scrutiny to his pattern of destructive relationships. Through it all, LaBeouf has admitted in interviews that intimacy and trust have always been difficult for him. He often cited his childhood trauma and battles with addiction as reasons why his relationships became unstable. While some partners described him as deeply creative and passionate, others saw only volatility and danger. In the end, Shia LaBeouf's love life became inseparable from his scandals. Rather than providing stability, his relationships often amplified the chaos, exposing the darker sides of his personality and fueling the controversies that would later overshadow his career. As Shia LaBeouf's fame grew, so too did his reputation for erratic and self-destructive behavior. What began as minor controversies quickly spiraled into a series of scandals that threatened to overshadow his career entirely. LaBeouf's first major brushes with the law came in the late 2000s. In 2007, he was arrested for trespassing at a Chicago Walgreens after refusing to leave the store. The charges were later dropped, but the incident raised eyebrows. A year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence after a car accident that left his hand seriously injured. Although he avoided jail time, the event marked the beginning of a troubling pattern: arrests, court appearances, and public apologies that became almost routine. By the early 2010s, LaBeouf's behavior turned increasingly bizarre. In 2014, he disrupted a Broadway performance of Cabaret starring Alan Cumming, allegedly shouting obscenities and smoking inside the theater. He was arrested for disorderly conduct, and the footage of him being dragged out in handcuffs went viral. Around the same time, he began appearing at red carpet events with paper bags over his head. One famously scrawled with the words, "I am not famous anymore." While some dismissed these actions as publicity stunts, others saw them as signs of deeper mental health struggles. LaBeouf also faced accusations of plagiarism in 2013 when it was revealed that his short film HowardCantor.com had lifted dialogue directly from a comic book by Daniel Clowes. The scandal sparked outrage in the creative community and led to a series of strange apologies from Shia, including skywriting the words, "I am sorry," over Los Angeles. But the most damaging scandal came in 2020. When singer FKA Twigs filed a lawsuit against him, accusing him of sexual battery, assault, and infliction of emotional distress during their relationship. Her lawsuit detailed disturbing allegations of physical violence, emotional manipulation, and psychological abuse. She described living under constant fear, alleging that LaBeouf imposed controlling rules, isolated her, and engaged in violent outbursts. The lawsuit received widespread media coverage and sparked serious conversations about abuse in Hollywood. LaBeouf initially denied some of the claims but later admitted in interviews that he had hurt those closest to him. "I have no excuses for my alcoholism or aggression," he said in a statement, acknowledging that he had been abusive to himself and others. These admissions, however, did little to repair his public image. As the scandals mounted, Hollywood began distancing itself from the actor once seen as the industry's golden boy. Studios hesitated to cast him, and projects he had been attached to quietly moved on without him. His talent was never in question. Films like Honey Boy, 2019, and Pieces of a Woman, 2020, proved his artistic depth, but his personal demons overshadowed even his strongest performances. By the end of the decade, LaBeouf's career had shifted from mainstream blockbusters to smaller indie projects, often reflecting his turbulent life. Yet no amount of artistic credibility could undo the damage of his scandals. What had once been a story of meteoric rise was now a narrative of self-destruction, marked by addiction, violence, and a public fall from grace that few could have predicted during his Disney days. The fallout from Shia LaBeouf's scandals was swift and brutal. Once a regular fixture in Hollywood blockbusters, he found himself increasingly isolated from the very industry that had embraced him. Major studios began to view him as a liability, with producers reluctant to gamble on an actor whose off-screen behavior often made more headlines than his work. Projects he had once been attached to slipped away, and directors who once championed him kept their distance. Financially, the cost was equally severe. Years of legal battles, fines, and settlements chipped away at his fortune. His reputation as one of the most promising actors of his generation was now clouded by mugshots, courtroom appearances, and lurid headlines. To the public, LaBeouf became a symbol of squandered potential, a talented star undone by his own demons. Yet, despite the chaos, LaBeouf continued to seek redemption through art. His 2019 film Honey Boy, which he wrote and starred in, was a deeply personal project inspired by his own childhood and strained relationship with his father. Critics praised its raw honesty, and for a brief moment, it seemed LaBeouf had turned his pain into a powerful form of storytelling. The film reminded audiences of his undeniable talent and ability to channel personal trauma into art. In 2020, he delivered another acclaimed performance in Pieces of a Woman, playing a grieving husband alongside Vanessa Kirby. The film received strong reviews, with some critics arguing it was one of LaBeouf's best performances. But just as momentum began to shift in his favor, the FKA Twigs lawsuit surfaced, erasing any goodwill he had rebuilt. Public opinion turned sharply against him. While some admired his attempts at self-reflection and treatment for addiction and mental health, others believed his behavior was irredeemable. Hollywood, ever cautious of controversy, largely closed its doors. The comeback LaBeouf had hoped for collapsed under the weight of his unresolved personal issues and the seriousness of the allegations against him. Still, Shia LaBeouf's story is not one of complete disappearance. He has shown resilience, continuing to work sporadically in independent film and theater while addressing his struggles in therapy and rehabilitation programs. Whether these steps will lead to lasting change remains uncertain, but his attempt to reclaim control over his narrative suggests a man unwilling to be defined solely by scandal. For now, his career exists in limbo, a talented actor searching for redemption, but forever shadowed by the consequences of his past. Today, Shia LaBeouf stands at a crossroads. No longer the box office draw of his Transformers years, he remains a figure of fascination, praised for his talent yet haunted by his controversies. In recent years, he has stepped back from Hollywood's spotlight, choosing instead to focus on personal healing, therapy, and exploring his faith. He has spoken publicly about attending rehabilitation programs and working to confront the cycles of addiction and violence that derailed his life. Though his name rarely appears on blockbuster posters anymore, LaBeouf continues to attract interest from independent filmmakers who admire his raw intensity on screen. Projects like Honey Boy and Pieces of a Woman proved that even in the midst of scandal, his artistry could still resonate powerfully. Yet the shadow of his past looms large, with audiences and industry insiders divided on whether he deserves another chance. Public perception remains conflicted. Some view him as a cautionary tale, a once promising star undone by his own destructive impulses. Others see a wounded artist struggling to rebuild, arguing that his willingness to confront his trauma should not be dismissed. His story embodies the tension between talent and accountability, raising difficult questions about forgiveness in an age of public reckoning. As of now, Shia LaBeouf's future remains uncertain. Will he fade into obscurity, remembered only for the scandals that defined him? Or will he find a way to reinvent himself, channeling his troubled past into a second act of redemption? What is clear is that Shia LaBeouf's journey is far from ordinary. From child star to global icon, from scandal-ridden headlines to quiet attempts at recovery, his life reflects both the brilliance and the darkness that can exist within the same person. And while the world watches, the final chapter of his story has yet to be written.